In this video, I'll give you some tips for solving the ALEKS problem called distinguishing an ionic from a molecular compound by physical properties. So this problem is going to describe 3 different compounds, and it asks you to classify the compounds as either ionic or molecular. I accidentally hit this button when I took the screenshot, so ignore that. I didn't intend to mark that. I looked at a few versions of this problem, and for the versions of the problems that I looked at, none of the correct answers were can't decide. All of the problems I looked at, you were able to tell if it was ionic or molecular. That doesn't mean that can't decide is never the correct answer, but just think really carefully before you choose that as the correct answer, because I don't think it's very likely. So what I've done is given you a list of characteristics of ionic compounds, and as you read these descriptions, you're going to look for these particular characteristics to see if the compound has them or has something that is the opposite of any one of these characteristics. Molecular compounds just have the opposite of these characteristics. So for example, ionic compounds have high melting points, typically 500 degrees or greater. Melting points, same thing as freezing point. So a molecular compound would be something that has a lower melting or freezing point, something lower than 500. Ionic compounds are typically solid. They typically have no smell. They're brittle, which means that they snap or break easily. They are electrolytes, which means that they will dissolve in water, and then that aqueous solution conducts electricity. They are conductive. Ionic compounds are conducted if they are melted or if they are dissolved. They're typically not conductive in the solid state. So let's take a look at compound number 1. What I'm going to do is just read through this and look for some kind of hint in this problem that aligns with one of these characteristics. So this says it's a hard grayish white solid. A sample of it is put into a quartz tube, heated strongly. It starts to melt at 1055 degrees Celsius, giving us that melting point or the freezing point much higher than 500 degrees. That makes this substance an ionic compound. Really didn't mean to check that box. Compound number 2 says it's a clear liquid with a strong, pleasant, fruity smell. So first of all, ionic compounds typically aren't liquid, they're typically solids, and then also ionic compounds are typically odorless. So right here we have 2 things that are not characteristics of ionic compounds, and I'm going to say that this is molecular. But there's also some more hints in here as well. It says that it freezes at about -10 degrees, which is significantly less than 500, and it says that it does not conduct electricity, which would actually, that's not super helpful because ionic compounds in the solid state a lot of times don't conduct electricity either. And then last but not least, compound 3, it says it's a deep red solid with a noticeable unpleasant smell. So that smell is characteristic of a molecular compound because ionic compounds are typically odorless. This thing dissolves in water. When it dissolves in water, it doesn't change the conductivity of the water. So ionic compounds, when they are dissolved in water, they typically increase conductivity. So this I'm going to classify as molecular.